Hey, Mikey, I got a joke for you, and it goes along with our program today. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so a medieval European history expert walks into a bar on Christmas Eve and orders a drink. He tells the bartender, "I just love this time of year. It's full of historic significance. In fact, not many people know that the first documented occurrence of Santa Claus was when he hit a dragon and killed it while flying over medieval England. You might say he slayed it." Okay, well, I got a couple of yucks. Okay, I got one more for you.
All right.
Did you hear about the kidnapping at the playground in Cosmic City yesterday?
No, what happened?
He eventually woke up.
This is wonderful. Okay, so that is not a bad effort, Mr. Robin, but I actually have a joke for you this time.
Okay.
What did the buffalo say when his son left for college?
I do not know.
Bison.
Hey, everybody, it's your favorite wonky host, Mr. Robin, coming at you digitally from the compound, our fortified and hopefully today fireproof fortress just east of Fargo, Oklahoma. As always, I'm joined by my partner in crime, my co-host extraordinaire, and my all-around best pal, Mikkel Robinson, known throughout the podcast uni as Mikey on the mic. Say hi, Mikey.
Hello. Or better yet, Heidi-do. By the way, this is the second episode in a row of this train wreck of a podcast in which you referred to me as your all-around best pal. What's up with that?
Consider it a promotion. Anyway, we also have my cousin Fred and his latest flame, Magdalene, known throughout the vehicle repossession universe as Repo Babe, here with us today, helping us make this podcast magic happen. You can follow their chaotic adventures on my seemingly not-so-daily blog, the Cosmic City blog. We're joined here today on Mr. Robin's Hood podcast by the writer, historian, public speaker, researcher, and former law enforcement special agent with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, Mr. Dee Cordry. Dee, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Nice to be here.
Great. I thought we'd start out by talking a little bit about your law enforcement career with OSBI.
Well, I became interested in law enforcement when I was in college, and I ended up working originally as a clerk at the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. And after I got my degree and a few years later, I was fortunate enough to become an agent and began doing criminal investigations. And I did that for 25 years and retired in 2008. And during that time, I had quite a few opportunities to work a whole bunch of different types of criminal investigations, and I was on a drug task force. I participated in investigations of high-profile figures. I assisted in a lot of homicide investigations, and was in charge of a few myself. And then in about 2000, personal computer use was becoming more common, which also meant that the use of computers in committing crimes was becoming more common. And so
right.
at the OSBI, they created a computer crime unit, and I was one of the agents assigned to that. And so I did that for the next 8 years, and I had always been kind of a handy with electronics and had become a computer user, and so I kind of fit right in and specialized in that until I retired. And so as a result of that, I became real interested in law and order history, in that to a lot of my writing and so on.
Yeah, I was kind of interested in how you made the jump from being a Leo to, if you will, a law enforcement officer, to writing.
The Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation was created way back in 1925. And in the 1980s, myself and the public information officer felt like we ought to do something to recognize the history of the agency. And so we started doing some research, and the more that progressed, I just became captivated and really started digging deep into the history of the OSBI. We had been to the Oklahoma Historical Society, and the gentleman who was the editor of the Chronicles of Oklahoma at that time, Dr. Bob Blackburn, was helpful, and he said, now, whatever you guys come up with, write it up, and I'll publish it in the Chronicles of Oklahoma. Well, that's what I did. And I learned an extremely important lesson. What I submitted to Dr. Blackburn to be published was extremely primitive, let's say. And Bob, as the editor of the Chronicles, took that really rough material and turned it into a readable article. And so that was published in 1985.
I see.
Well, I was hooked then on, and so I continued doing law and order research, and well, one thing led to another, and I ended up writing a book about the early history of the OSBI.
And that was Alive if Possible, Dead if Necessary.
That's correct. That's correct. It's kind of a lengthy title, but that is the order that was given in Oklahoma Territory in the 1890s to the lawmen to get these outlaws and bring them in alive if possible, but dead if necessary. Well, guess what? I found out that the crime in Oklahoma was just as bad as it was in the territorial days. And so again, this time the governor of Oklahoma gave that same instruction to a gathering of Oklahoma law enforcement officers. So that was the kind of the theme of that book.
So, Dee, I kind of have a question. Don't mean to interrupt you, but so from what I'm gathering, you didn't have a particular interest in writing prior to kind of just maybe getting thrown into it, writing for the Chronicles, and then getting hooked and kind of running with it. Did I pick that up right?
Yes, that's correct.
That's very interesting to me.
I've not really been interested in history, like in high school or college, but I got hooked, and I had so many opportunities to meet different people with knowledge. I got to meet some men that had been agents in the 1950s and 1960s, and just other extremely interesting people. And so it really was quite nice for me. And
Right.
a lot of nice people, a lot of helpful people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then what happened is one of the agents that I worked with that had been my boss off and on over the years was at Cheyenne, Arapaho. And he started telling me stories about his great grandparents in these old West stories about Cheyenne Indians and all of these events that occurred in southeast Colorado and northwest Oklahoma and things of that nature. Well, one thing led to another. And the next thing you know, I started off as a hobby, basically, and then I felt like at a point that I really need to write a book about this. And so that's what I ended up doing, and I published that in 2022.
Right.
The title of it is Children of White Thunder.
Right. And just to understand, your source, even though you didn't actually name him, that was Harvey Pratt?
That's correct. That's correct. And Harvey and I are good friends and have been good friends for a long, long time. And we worked together. And but also a lot of that time I worked for him. And but yeah, we shared a lot of information. But I got so into this and would go to the Oklahoma Historical Society, to the archives, and find material. And I would immediately tell Harvey about it, and then he'd say, you know what? I remember my mother talking about something like that. And so Harvey had a lot of input, or had shared some really important stories with me.
Yeah.
And so this book covers the time period from the 1830s all the way up to the present.
Right.
And that last chapter focuses on Harvey and his mother and events that, in how all of this kind of comes to a conclusion there. But yeah, Harvey Pratt's famous artist, and now is just internationally known for having designed the new Native American Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. there on the mall.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, Harvey designed that and oversaw. It's just amazing. Amazing story.
Yeah. And I was trying to kind of get it through my head, because as far as I know, you are not yourself Native American.
Yeah, that's correct.
So did you find any, resistance when you were trying to interview people for the book, or did Harvey kind of kick those doors open for you?
Well, about half and half there. Initially, yeah. But as people became to see what kind of information I was finding, and I share that information, and then people shared information back with me, and still do. And so even though the book's been out for 2 years, I'm still researching. I may write another book. I don't know, but the information is so fascinating. And when I decided I need to write a book about this, I didn't know then what the ending of the book would be. I was reviewing the material that I had and continuing to find more material. And so it's like a big puzzle, and all of these pieces started coming together, and it formed into the book. And I'll tell you a little story.
Okay.
Initially, probably because of my law enforcement background, I was writing the story in chronological order. Well, that made plenty of sense to me, but to other people I would tell about it, it wasn't getting through that way.
I see.
So I went back and reorganized everything by subject or by topic. And most of it is still in chronological order, sort of. But each chapter kind of focuses on a particular topic or event.
I see.
It seems to work really well that way.
Yeah. Well, I noticed there was a quote by Dr. Blackburn on the back cover of the book. I don't know if you'd call that a preface or a foreword or when it's on the back cover. But in that quote, he states that American Indian tribal histories have been written through the lens of federal officials and white civilians who left written records and accounts that are easily accessible and considered primary sources by professional historians. The results too often have been one-sided narratives that lump together all tribal members as either reactionary adversaries or aggrieved victims, and, with very few exceptions, faceless and nameless players on the stage of romantic frontier history. And the thing that struck me about that quote was that you kind of blew up that mold by delving deeply into one family's history throughout what is often an over-romanticized American West. And the family you wrote about had involvement in every, or it seems to have had involvement in every major engagement before, during, and after the Plains Indians War, and you weaved a story based more on survival and preservation of the history, and that was really the thing that kind of struck me about that book.
Yes, and I had struggled quite a bit trying to describe this to people. Mm-hmm. Even historians, and just like Dr. Blackburn says here, most of what has been written about is based on a certain set of sources.
Yeah.
And this book includes a lot of that, but it tells it maybe in a different perspective, plus
right.
a context.
Yeah.
And I was so fascinated when I started connecting the dots or discovering how Harvey Pratt's great-grandparents, Edmund Guerrier and his wife Julia Bent, mm-hmm. the daughter of William Bent of the famous Bent Fort in Colorado.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, her grandfather, Julia's grandfather, was White Thunder, the keeper of the sacred medicine arrows of the Cheyenne tribe. Mm-hmm. And it goes all the way from him to his children and their children, which was Julia. She marries Edmund Guerrier, and their granddaughter, Anne, was Harvey Pratt's mother. And so this culture, this heritage and this culture, in spite of all of these tragic events and adversity, still survived. Mm-hmm. And it still survives today.
Yeah, and in a sense, it's been passed down through each generation to Harvey to be able to have those conversations with you and give you some of the insight. And, you know, sometimes in families, we don't do that. And so I think that's kind of a beautiful thing that's going on there.
I've just been extremely fortunate to be able to gather this information with a lot of help from experts, people at the Oklahoma Historical Society and the archives and other places. You just never know where you might find a particular piece of information. Mm-hmm. But it has involved a lot of luck, but a lot of hard work. And for me, the research is fun. The writing is hard work.
Yeah. I was going to say the research is probably a lot like you're investigating in a sense. To me, they kind of are similar. So for you to enjoy the research, it makes complete sense to me, because that's kind of what you did in your job at OSBI, investigating, and in researching, you're investigating. And writing is hard. Robin and I can, agree with you there as writers ourselves. It is even if you're seasoned, it's still something that...
Oh, there are days you just stare at a screen and go, okay, not today. We'll try again tomorrow.
Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you how many times I have found some little tidbit of information. Yeah. And I call Harvey up and say, Harvey, you won't believe. Let me tell you what I found today. And, it was exciting and is still exciting. Mm-hmm. And from time to time, I will be someplace selling a few books, signing some books. And every time somebody, at least one person, will have a little story. They're tribal members. Some of them are not tribal members, but, a lot of this stuff is timely. The big movie event in the last year has been this big movie, Killers of the Flower Moon, about the Osage Indians. Right. And murders, and well, guess what? It didn't just happen to the Osage Indians. Similar things happened with these guardianships and just out and out stealing these allotted lands. Yeah. It happened to the Cheyenne and Arapahoes. I write about that in detail. There's 2 or 3 chapters that have details about how that all took place. And, I think most people fairly have a general idea that lands were taken, lands were stolen, or, this land used to belong to Native Americans.
Sure.
I found enough details and provide some of the names of government officials and how this happened. And some of these Edmund Guerrier family and friends, Julia Bent Guerrier had an allotment, and her allotment was put up for sale by the Indian agent. And it was an example of these schemes, but for some reason, it didn't work. Her allotment was still in family hands as late as 1967. I don't know why, but it just helps illustrate and puts names to these people. And and again, we're not just saying, well, the Cheyenne tribe and this and that. Well, no, we're talking about specific people whose descendants are here. They're still here. And so as you can see, I'm very passionate about it. And it's just been very nice, and people are so interested these days. They are so interested in this type of history. And so when a movie like Killers of the Flower Moon sheds light on Oklahoma history, well, that's great for all of us. It's, it brings more of this to the attention of the public.
And it's interesting you bring that up. as I understand it, you're actually credited in the book, Killers of the Flower Moon. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, I'm assuming that was on a consulting basis. What was your contribution to that effort?
Well, see, this goes back to basically to Dr. Blackburn in 1985 when he published the article that I wrote in the Chronicles of Oklahoma. It included a lot of information about the Osage murders because guess what? One of the first agents of the OSBI in 1925 assisted the federal agents in investigating the Osage murders.
I see.
And when the author began his research, he came across that. And then he had also found out about my book, Alive If Possible, Dead If Necessary. And about a third of that book is devoted to that investigation of the Osage murders. And so he contacted me and told me what he was working on, and he came to Oklahoma City, and we visited several times, and I shared with him information that I had, and it had already been published in that first book. And I had additional materials, but I shared with him what I had. He shared information with me, and so that's why I'm in the acknowledgments. And I have a little story I like to tell.
Okay.
When the book was published, and my brother was familiar with things that I had written, and he calls me up one day. He says, "Hey, I'm at the airport, and they have those airport bookstores."
Right.
And he said, "Hey, there's a book here about the Osage murders. Have you heard about it?" I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "If you'll open that up and look in the acknowledgments, I'm in the acknowledgments." So I had been helping other authors and had been in the acknowledgments in some of those books. And then I got to do my current book, and I got to give acknowledgments to other people.
I understand.
And
Great.
It's been a great experience, and I'm still in contact with a lot of different people, and that have different research projects going on. And I've done some writing of some newspaper articles for the Cheyenne Arapaho Tribal Tribune, and I have been invited to different museums, and they like the book. They have had me come and give them a talk, and so it's and you continue to meet new people, and
Sure.
pretty nice.
Yeah.
Pretty nice. I'm enjoying it.
Well, we are speaking to museums inviting you. You kind of dropped in and stopped and saw me at the Plains Indians and Pioneers Museum and gave me a little promotional card about your book. And I was instantly intrigued because your book, Children of White Thunder, is definitely very pertinent to the history of our area and the significance that the Cheyenne and Arapaho had in the history here in northwest Oklahoma. And so I was instantly like, yeah, we've got to figure out how to get you here to talk about this and get your book in our gift shop. And we're really looking forward to that. We've been able to make that happen through a grant through Oklahoma Humanities. And we're really looking forward to you coming April 6th to kind of do a lecture and a book signing and everything. So that will be at 1 p.m. at the Plains Indians and Pioneers Museum. We wanted to definitely talk to you before that so we could help promote you coming as well, because it's something that we encourage people to come check out.
Well, your location is right in the middle of so much of this history.
Sure.
That region of Oklahoma, just south of the Kansas border, from the edge of the Oklahoma Panhandle all the way to the Arkansas River was known as the Cherokee Strip, or the more correct name was Cherokee Outlet.
Yep.
Yeah.
And part of that land had been part of the Treaty of Medicine Lodge in 1867.
Yeah.
And they had designated this piece of land on the south side of the Kansas border. The previous treaty in 1865, called the Treaty of the Little Arkansas, had created a reservation that was in Kansas. Well, the powers that be decided they wanted those Cheyenne and Arapahoes south of the Kansas border, and that resulted in this 1867 Medicine Lodge Treaty. The Cheyenne Arapaho did not occupy that reservation. That was in 1867. Well, in 1868, what happens? There's the big battle, and called the Battle of the Washita.
Right.
But was a massacre when U.S. troops attacked the village of Black Kettle out on the Washita River near the Texas border. 6 or 7 months later, the President of the United States, by executive order, creates a new reservation that's not the Medicine Lodge Treaty up on the Kansas border in the Cherokee Outlet, actually south of Woodward, extending across the North Canadian, or portions of the North Canadian, the Canadian River, across the Washita, and as far east as current-day El Reno. And that became a new reservation. So what I'm getting at is Woodward is right in the middle of all of this activity. And I write about it. Again, I have an entire chapter about this, all of these things involving the Medicine Lodge Treaty. And a lot of people misunderstand, and they think that this current land down here where Concho is located, at the tribal headquarters at Concho near El Reno,
right,
and the land that extended from there all the way to the Texas border to the west, and almost all the way to Woodward to the north, that doesn't have anything to do with the Medicine Lodge Treaty.
Right.
That's a non-treaty reservation that was just done by a stroke of the pen by the president. And so I tried to clear some of that up, and it's it does get complicated, and it's not I tried really hard to make it more easy or understandable to read, but it can be a little difficult or challenging.
So, Dee, we're curious if you have any new projects in the works you'd like to discuss with us.
Yeah, I have always been extremely interested in a portion of what I call the Black Kettle Massacre, or the Battle of the Washita. And at the conclusion of the fighting, the soldiers had seized Cheyenne and Arapaho, and maybe a Sioux, women and children. And the number given in some instances was 53. And they took them, depending on how you want to phrase it, as prisoners of war or hostages or captives, however you want to put it, from the Washita River back to Camp Supply.
Correct.
And then they went on from there to Dodge City in Kansas, and then finally to Fort Hays.
Yeah.
And they were held in a stockade there as captives. And they returned them to Camp Supply in the summer of 1869. Still, I'm trying to find the answer to who were they? What were their names? And how many were there? and yeah, I found some military records that talk about at least one of the children was not returned. He was kept in Kansas.
Wow.
And then there's other people that died up there. And so I'm trying to track that down, and I've made some progress, and I think sometime in the next few months I'll find those names.
So you're actually trying to put a name to a face, or...
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
See, a couple of photographs were taken, and there are some photographs in books, and I think they may have come from the OU Western History Collection.
Mm-hmm.
But they're group photographs of these captives. Well, it's some of the captives. If you count the number of people in that photograph, there's not 53 there. But all along, I have been so interested in trying to connect events to actual places and actual people with actual names. And that's what I think stands out about my current book.
Sure. Yeah.
And so the research that I work on now, that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to connect these people. Well, I know where they were captured because we know where that battle happened out west of Cheyenne.
Right.
And we know where Camp Supply is, and we know where Dodge, and we know where Hayes is. But what about in between? How many days did it take them to get from Ouachita to Camp Supply? And there's a lot of stories, and there's accusations or rumors, but not just from one person, about things that happened. And when I come up with these names, well, see, that presents somewhat of a dilemma. Do the descendants of those captives particularly want those names disclosed?
Huh.
You know, you have to take that into consideration. What how much of these that they may feel like that's private, and so we'll take that into account. I'll be working on that, and see, there's other projects going on. In 1875, a group of Cheyenne Arapahoes were taken into custody. They became captives, and there were supposedly 33 of them that were put in chains at Darlington, which is was just outside of El Reno and was the agency headquarters. And they sent those 33 along with Comanches and Kiowas and a Caddo and I think 2 Arapahoes. And so they're supposed to have been 72 people altogether that were sent off to a military prison in Florida.
Yeah.
And it was called Fort Marion.
Yeah.
And they were incarcerated there without due process. There was no military court, no tribunal. They were just rounded up and sent off to prison for 3 years. And there's a huge story there, and I write about quite a bit of that in my book. And the primary connection to that event and people in my book is one of those Cheyennes that was sent off. His name was Ochre Hater, and then his, you might say, Americanized name was given as David Pendleton. And, well, later on, he married a Bent girl who was a descendant of White Thunder, the Arrow Keeper. And when I found that out, well, then I had to find out about him. Well, when I found out about Ochre Hater, I found out about Fort Marion. research into that is still ongoing, and there are descendants of those Plains Indians that were sent to Fort Marion, and people are researching, and they're hoping to, with permission of the descendants, they're hoping to perhaps have a museum exhibit somewhere, and maybe a documentary. And so I told them I'll share whatever information I have. There's a couple of chapters in my book that make references to a lot of that.
I see.
And see, I don't think that we know for certain who all was sent to Florida, and that sometimes the numbers don't match up, and this is just a lot of, to me, unanswered questions.
Do you think it's actually possible to ever finally get to the bottom of it all?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so. I think there's more and more government records that are becoming available, such as electronically.
Mm-hmm.
And, with my first book, Alive If Possible, Dead If Necessary, well, I had other historians that had shared valuable information with me. However, a huge amount of that research, and this was in the 1980s and 1990s, was me going to the Oklahoma Historical Society and sitting down in the newspaper archives at a microfilm reader, nothing electronic, no search. You know what the search engine was you.
Yeah.
You sit there
Right.
and page through a newspaper, page by page, speed reading, and I'm looking for bank robberies, Oklahoma bank robberies in the 1920s, and time. You talk about time consuming. I don't think I would do it today. I don't think I have the patience.
I feel like that's, if you want to come search through the newspapers at the museum here in Woodward, that's what you got to do.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
still in those times. But we actually use the Oklahoma Historical Society's search engine online, because a lot of the microfilm that we have, they also have digitized, and so we refer people to that to kind of help, because you're right, you can sit there and spend hours and hours and hours doing that, and that's how you know when somebody's really devoted to what they're trying to figure out. Dee, because we're getting a little over our time here. It's just you're a plethora of knowledge and have so much insight to what you've got going on with these books. But we wanted to ask if you had any advice you would want to offer anyone who wishes to write about history.
My advice is to follow your instincts, and you may be very knowledgeable about specific things. And the more you learn, and as you move forward, chances are there's a phrase called subject matter expert. And chances are at some point you will be a subject matter expert on that portion of history. There's going to be plenty of other people who have written about certain things, but I believe that anybody can become a subject matter expert on certain things, and I recommend go for it. And I'm also a big proponent of self-publishing. In this day and age, there's a thing called publish on demand.
Right.
And what I ended up doing with Children of White Thunder is I went to the really, really big online website thing, and that sells all kinds of stuff that originally started off selling books, and they will publish your book, but they don't print one until somebody buys one.
Right.
When somebody goes to the website, and they pay for one. Well, then the book is printed and bound and shipped, and that's publishing on demand. And it's different than the old-fashioned or traditional publishing, where a publisher publishes 500 books in the first run, and they're in a warehouse and they're trying to sell them. But anyway, a guy that you're familiar with, Bob Ray.
Yep.
I have visited with him over the years, and we've talked about that, and I think he has done that a couple of times recently.
Yeah, he has actually. I have assisted him in a little bit of his work on the cover designs to help him with that process. So he's got two that he's done that way. And actually, both Robin and I have gone that route as well. I was turned down by a publisher. I gave it a shot. They told me no. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go to, direct publishing. And I was going to ask that question. So I'm glad you brought it up, kind of how you went about getting both those books published. But we're all kind of doing the same thing. And I think that's cool.
Well, I appreciate you guys asking me to visit. And as you can see, I'm pretty enthusiastic about history and publishing, and
sure.
I'm really looking forward to coming up there and visiting and giving a little talk. And primarily, I'm going to be talking about kind of the first portion of my book, the 1838 Battle of Wolf Creek, which is out there just south of Fort Supply. And this was a battle in which the Cheyenne Arapahoes went to battle with the Kiowas. And White Thunder, the keeper of the sacred medicine arrows, was killed in that battle. So we'll be talking about that and looking at some maps and all kinds of stuff. And so it'll be good.
Great.
Yeah, we're definitely looking forward to it, Dee, and we appreciate the time you took today to talk with us and give your insight. And it was very informative and very interesting to hear your process and what you've got going on.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it.
So we have been speaking with and his credits are long. He is with Dee Cordry. He is a writer, historian, public speaker, researcher, and former law enforcement special agent with OSBI here in the state of Oklahoma. And Dee, we appreciate your time spent with us, and we sure look forward to seeing you at the museum in April.
Sounds good to me.
Mikey, I think you'll agree that was another great interview for our podcast.
I absolutely agree. It was very interesting listening to him talk about his time as a investigator with the OSBI to becoming a writer who had no interest in writing, because I'm sorry, I've been interested in that forever. So to hear him say like, oh yeah, no, it just came about. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah.
That was like the first thing I ever knew I was ever going to be. I don't know how, what about you? You knew that about yourself before?
Yeah, I think so. I really did. I think I did create a book when I was about 6 years old.
Right. See, I'm not sure if it was 6 or if it was like 8, but mine was called The Magical Rainforest. I still have it. I'm going to show this to you.
Oh, my. Yeah.
But what about yours?
Mine was a story about a kid being kidnapped, and it was called Kidnapped.
How authentic.
Well,
So Dee's is definitely about history, which we're both interested in, and history that connects to where we live, which is really cool.
Relevant to this area, certainly. Yep.
Which I don't know about you, but sometimes just like hearing stories like that and just and being in the space that it happened, it's I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of an interesting
Yeah.
feeling,
Yeah.
in a sense.
Yeah.
Like the energies of that still exist.
Right. So, Mikey, what current projects do you have going on?
Well, I was trying to figure out exactly what that looked like. Right now, currently, I'm entering some photography and one painting into the Northwestern Oklahoma State University's art show, or NWSU Art Society's art show, so to speak, I would say. That's their official name. And they've done it for a long time. When I was going to school there, I entered it. And then I took several years off, I'd say. And probably the last 3 years, I've picked it back up, and I've been entering it. And it's fun. I win stuff. And winning stuff is always fun, right? And I have 13 pictures that I'm going to enter. So.
Okay. Great.
And I don't know.
Do you have any writing projects going on?
Well, I think I said this already, but I've started a manuscript for the sequel to For the Days We Spend in Hell, but I haven't done jack with it for, I don't know, several months now. So, but I'll pick it back up.
Yeah.
It's something I plan to do, and it's not going to be the first book, when you have to go through that process the first time. It's definitely a struggle. It's definitely not as big of a struggle. It's just sitting down and doing it at this point. So I know you understand, because you just dropped a rewrite of your book. And
I did.
Tell me about that.
And it's it's available on Amazon.com. Just go in there and put my name in the search. You can also go on to my website, robinhoweiler.com. And from there, you can go to the store, and the book's available in the store. And those will come to you autographed. And there's this current book, which was actually my first novel. And you can also buy another book I wrote called, that was based on blog posts that I had done, called Meanwhile Back at the Compound.
Which, Cousin Fred.
Cousin Fred plays prominently.
Who's back there working his magic with now Magdalene. Used to be Gigi, though. But I hear Gigi's coming back.
Let's not spill any secrets.
That was one tiny piece. We got to give him something to look forward to, because it's not so daily anymore.
Well, that's very true. That's very true.
So, anyhow, carry on.
Okay. So I guess we're going to close this out now. And by reminding everyone, as we always do, to stay hungry, stay foolish, and most importantly, stay weird.